Hello and a very warm welcome to the Property Investor Podcast. I, of course, am your host, Paul Lanfear. And as ever, this is when I speak to some of the most interesting, inspiring and resilient people in property investing and beyond. As you know, my inner lawyer has to say something before we get stuck in, which is, of course, nothing in this podcast is financial, legal or health advice. Naturally, you will do your own due diligence, but of course, you know that. It is with great pleasure that I have the pleasure of introducing two of the big hitters of the property industry, Andrew Roberts and Ranjan Bhattacharya. Gentlemen, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much. How are you, Paul?
I literally have never been better. It's 2023 it's been a blistering start to the year, but I've got no complaints. It's all good. I'm sure it's the same for you guys. Now, obviously, you're well known in property circles, I think specifically around the commercial to resi space, but I think well known more generally. But for the benefit of those people who haven't necessarily come across your work, let's do like the property CV. Now, for the sort of eagle-eyed or keen listener, they'll recognise Andrew's name and they'll know that in Q4 of last year, we did a long-form podcast on his origin story. So you're welcome to go and seek that out. Ranjan, starting with you then, tell us a little bit give us the overview of your kind of property investing and how you got started, what you primarily invest in, what your kind of portfolio looks like now.
Pretty much done everything in property since 1990. Graduated from university, degree in computer science, bought a property. I initially embarked on a career in management consultancy with one of the big major international management consultancy firms. Did that for about 10 years, but in parallel to that, I consistently built a property portfolio, did the usual buy-to-let thing. And I quickly realized the corporate world, although fun in your 20s, is not the place where I aspired to be long-term. Mm-hmm. I always used to wonder what happened to all the people when they hit 45 years old. It was very much a young person's game, I felt. So I knew that, it had to have some kind of backup plan. But I wasn't one of these people who hated my career. I actually loved it. So it took a lot to make me leave it in the end. But in the end, I think what happens is that when you do a job, there's normally 80% that you love, and there's 20% that irritates you that you just got to do. In any career that you do, you'll always have that sort of mix. Mm-hmm. But when your sort of side hustle overtakes your day job to such an extent, that 20% irritation suddenly becomes a little bit more intolerable, and eventually you end up leaving. I think the big thing that happened to me when I left full-time employment in 2001 was the last time I had a job. And until then, it was vanilla buy-to-lets, HMOs, that kind of thing. But after I went full-time in property, which is a phrase I hate, but full-time in property, that's when the development career started. Instead of buying individual properties to let out, basically building blocks of apartments and then letting those individual units out. And London was my stomping ground. And in the early 2000s, around 2005, 2006, we had a challenge. That was when the challenge came with yields in London. Yields became much lower. And if you wanted double digit, you'd have to go up north. And I wasn't really willing to do that. North to me means Edgware, Cockfosters, Statmore. So I wasn't really willing to do that. So what I found was that if I would pick commercial properties or mixed use properties, shops and uppers, then when I look at the blended yield of the building, I was suddenly getting 10, 12% without going up north, staying in London. Mm-hmm. But of course, at that time, there was no such thing as permitted development. Commercial to residential conversions, I did my first one in 2006. That was under full planning permission. That was to put a flat in the back of a shop in the Holloway Road. That was my first one in 2006, before any PD came about. And that's how I achieved good yields in London. And then in 2013, it was as though Christmas had come. what was a pain in the ass, I don't know if I can say that with your legal disclaimer, but what was a pain in the ass to do under planning permission suddenly became permitted development. And then, of course, in 2021, these rules were revised and put on further steroids. And of course, now we have recession, we have changing trends in the way business is done, which means a lot more commercial properties are becoming defunct. The recession sees a contraction in the need for commercial space. So a lot of these trends are coming together, coupled with permitted development rights, which allow you to repurpose these defunct buildings, are now creating the biggest opportunity I've seen in property since in my entire 30-year career. So I do that. Along with Andrew, we host the UK's #1 property investors networking meeting. We have 300 people come every month. I'm one of the property angels on Property Elevator, which is now in its 6th series. It's a Dragon's Den type show on Sky, where people pitch for funding for their property deals. And increasingly in the last couple of series, the most profitable deals have been commercial to resi conversion opportunities. And I'm also a judge. I've been a judge for the last 10 years on the Property Investor Awards, which is now in its 11th year. And again, the most outstanding deals that seem to come up on top in the last couple of years have been those commercial to residential conversions. So that's basically me.
Wow. Well, that's quite the CV, Ranjan. Thank you for that. So just before we move on to Andrew, do you remember your first ever property? Do you remember where that is and what it was?
Monopoly. 8 years old, probably the Angel of Islington. But you know, I got a set of Monopoly for Christmas, and I was mad on Monopoly. I used to play it all school holidays, but the game of Monopoly makes so much sense in life. And what I found interesting was that I was one of those kids who, you know, there were kids who would, in the set of Monopoly, you'd get this little piece of paper that was all the rules. And there were people that would look for, you know, rules within that. But I would regularly make up my own. I'd say, well, okay, look, I'll give you've got, you know, 2 greens and I've got Oxford Street. I'll give you Oxford Street, but I'm not paying rent if I land on your hotels, and I want 30% of the rent on anyone else that lands on your hotels while you've got them. Otherwise, you can't have the set. That's not in the rule book. I mean, it doesn't say you can't do it. You know, why can't I have that? Why can't I make that offer to you? If you accept it and the other 4 people can play, you can just, you know, the other 4 people playing can just take a hike. That's a deal that we're doing between 2 parties. So I found Monopoly makes a lot of sense. You don't make any money. You don't do well. You fail by just passing go and taking a salary. You end up paying unexpected income tax bills and all of that, and it all goes. You know, you've got to invest in property. You've got to develop those properties. You've got to earn the rent roll, and you've got to do deals. And it's a metaphor for business life and life in property.
Right. Okay. So, like, the first recommendation is get all the kids playing Monopoly, and why not?
Absolutely.
I think on our dining room table, I think we've got the Leeds version as well. Andrew, we'll come to you now. So, give us the property CV. I know that we've spoken at length on a previous occasion, but give these people a bit of an overview.
Well, I'm sitting here and I'm feeling like a wee minnow against Mr. Bhattacharya. I mean, you know, he's a big hitter, isn't he? No, I left the corporate career in the year 2000, the end of 1999, the start of 2000. I thought, new millennium, new me, and became an entrepreneur and was actually running trading businesses. And it was a few years later that I joined the commercial property arena in 2005. So I was a little bit behind Mr. B by about 4 years. So we're both young minnows in that field. My first deal, before you ask that, it was actually a commercial property. I purchased it for the business. I say purchased. I purchased it. The business became the tenant. And I took the view that this rent lark, it's dead money, false money, might as well own it. And then I might as well take money out of the business and utilize it. And I was I'd set up my SaaS in 1996. So it was like, might as well utilize all of the benefits you can. So that to me was where I sort of started commercial property wise, done residential as well, got contracts with councils to house homeless and all sorts of different things. Pretty much done every strategy, taught, you know, I love it when people come to me and say, you can't do that. I'll prove you can. In the same way Ranjan makes his own rules up, I'm pretty similar in that sort of sense. I love it when somebody puts a sign up saying you cannot develop this land. There will be a way. And if they're saying you can't play ball games, play somewhere else, you know, play a different game, badminton or something that basically gets around the rules. So I will always find a way around rules. I love picking through legislation, having had a background in finance and law, accounting, and just finding where you can drive coach and horses through stuff. So that's my sort of background, because we've done an in-depth before, and I don't want to sort of take the whole podcast over.
No, that's beautiful. That's beautiful. So that brings us
another link to that below.
Exactly. So that beautifully kind of brings us up to the current day and where we are now. And that's really helpful. So thank you both of you. So look, I suppose that, you know, getting onto the real kind of meat of the conversation is you know, what's your view? So here we are, still in first quarter of 2023. 2022 is full of surprises. But we've got, you know, we've got this new year ahead of us still. Give us your take. So Andrew, will come to you, and then we'll come to you, Ranjan. And really, the floor is yours. You know, what's your view on, you know, where the economy is going, interest rates, cost of living, property? Give us your initial thoughts, and then we'll come on to Ranjan.
Okay. A lot of people are going, oh, 2023, it's going to be a year of massive price falls, 40% off residential pricing and so forth. I'd disagree. I sort of look at it from the point of view of it's not going to be a bad year. For every negative out there, there's a positive, a bit of yin and a bit of yang. You know, your glass is either half full, it's half empty. Where there's a loser, there's always a winner on the other side of the coin. And I focus on making sure I've got the knowledge, the skill, and the tools and the people around me to take advantage of those opportunities that I spot. So I sort of come at it from the point of view of I'm going to be a winner at the end of the year, not a loser. If you go into it listening to the news headlines, you'll think everybody's going to be a loser. If you went back to, I think it was June, July's newspaper headlines, inflation was going to be 18%. Well, actually, it peaked at 10.5. The last inflation reported last month was 10.1. So we're actually on the way down. And the Bank of England admit on their own data, I think it's page 86 of their report, that by June, inflation will be down within target range. So hang on a minute, where's this 18% come from? I focus on the positivity and I ignore the press. I don't watch news. I don't listen to radio news. I try and filter that out of my life because it's so negative. And I like to focus on the positive. So where do I think things are going? Interest rates, currently 4%. I think they're going to go up, peak at 4.75, and then probably jettison slowly down to around 4%. There's enough data out there. If we look at Jerome Powell, the chair of the Fed, the Americans are running 0.5% above us. He's talking about another 0.25% rise over there. You follow UK interest rates and follow US interest rates over the last 25 years, and we follow each other step by step. So I think that's a pretty good indicator. We're going up 0.5% more than likely in this next review on the 23rd of March. We will then probably follow suit another 0.25% if the Americans go up 0.25%, and that'll be where it peaks. The Americans have already said they've got disinflationary effects in their economy. We have a look at us versus America, 2% inflation target. They've got a jobs market that's very similar to ours. Their interest rates are very similar. their targets across all of the key KPIs that we have are very similar. So why wouldn't we be mirroring and matching, is what I say. If we look at inflation, the big elephant in the room, the statistics being published are actually a load of baloney. And I've broken this down, and I've taken the Office of National Statistics data, and we all hear this 10.5, 10.1 figure quoted on a regular basis. Well, that's a rolling figure, and it takes account of inflation that happened April last year and October last year. And what happened in April and October? Can you remember the mammoth event that happened? Yeah, the energy price spikes. Now, that's really interesting when you look at the energy price spikes that went on. But the Bank of England are continually saying inflation this month was 10%. If we actually look at the data, the last reported data was negative 0.6%. Inflation is on the way down, the same as the Americans are reporting. So we are tailing off. When you then include owner-occupier housing costs, that inflation is going up. What's the big thing on owner-occupier housing costs that's going up? Interest rates, mortgages. Therefore, that inflation is going up, but every other inflation is coming down. So we've got to try and look at this with a balanced scorecard approach in terms of, is inflation really going up, or are we being hoodwinked? House prices. I've put my name to this several times before. Peak to trough, I think there'll be a 10% movement maximum. The peak was August last year on house prices. We were 2.4% down to January, 2.1% down in February. So therefore, that's nearly 5%. The Halifax house price data reported, I think it was yesterday evening, was house prices were up 1.1%. Now, if we watch any other time in history, house prices do bobble up and down, and you do get these dysfunctional blips that happen. I mean, there's a house for sale on Regent's Park for 250 million. Do you think that'll skew the data a little bit about the average? You know, it all depends on what's being sold as to where the average lies. So I still hold firm that I believe house prices will be down around 10%. Now, that's really good news if you're an investor, because I'm looking at this and I'm going, well, if I'm an investor and I'm buying, it drops the price of the house, but what's happening to rents? Because there's been a lot of landlords exiting, rents are going up at an astronomical rate, so my yields are increasing. So I was talking to somebody, and they're buying a flat in central London, 200, 300 meters away from the London Eye, 450,000. The offer's been accepted at. Now, that to me is like, whoa, that is cheap compared to where it was. So prices are very, very competitive at the moment in the marketplace, and there's opportunity as investors to acquire inventory and make bigger yields than you used to be able to. Ranjan and I, we both teach the Commercial Property Mastermind, and that is a massive way of acquiring cheap real estate and adding massive value, converting commercial to residential. Now, commercial, I'll let Ranjan talk about that, so he's got something left after I've finished my detailed review.
Well, having seen Ranjan speak, I'm sure he's got one or two of his own thoughts as well. We'll see, won't we?
Absolutely. But there's a massive opportunity to sort of double, quadruple your money very quickly and very easily, because of the way commercial is dropping and resi isn't dropping at the same rate of knots.
Right.
If we look at employment, employment is pretty held stable. There's been a minor dip off in job adverts on a couple of the job advertising sites, but employment is fairly strong. We are suffering with a lot of strikes, which is causing dysfunctional behavior in this country at the moment. A lot of it is around inflation so high But actually, if you look at Tesco's, Iceland, and other major retailers, they were putting out press reports last month saying, actually, the manufacturers have been jacking prices up higher than the rates of inflation. And what we're seeing this month is prices of goods coming down in the supermarket. So I think people are trying to push the boundaries where they can and blame stuff on inflation, but then reining it back in. So I think overall, it's a great 2023 ahead of us, full of opportunity. If you've got the knowledge and you know how to grab hold of the opportunities that are out there. Yes, interest rates are going to go up, but you shouldn't do a deal if you've not got the margin in it and you've not stress tested it at a worst case interest rate. I mean, you've worked with myself and Ranjan before, and we tell you plan A, B, C, D, E, stress test it beyond belief, and make sure that you can get your money out, you know, if you really need to. So I'm not doing anything other than what I'd advise you to do, Paul.
Very good. Okay, so thank you for that. Thank you very much for that, Andrew. So Ranjan, over to you. And you're welcome to pick on any of the threads that Andrew has served up, or take us in your own direction. I'll leave it to you, Ranjan. So give us your take on things. Give us your big picture view.
Well, it's pretty similar to Andrew's, really. I'll just summarize it in layperson's terms, if you like. I think the important thing that is quite different about this economic climate, recession, whatever you want to call it, compared to others, is that, like in 2009, I don't think first of all, it hit like a truck. It was instant. And there was no clear end in sight. So it was a very uncertain time. This recession is quite different. And the reason it's been quite different is because since 2008, 2009, there's a lot that's been put in place to protect residential owner-occupiers. You can't get 95%, 100% mortgages for residential and non-status mortgages anymore like it could do pre-2008. You can't get interest-only residential owner-occupier mortgages. There's so many things that have been done, which mean that the owner-occupier market is much more protected, and that's why we're not seeing the falls in house prices that you would see, and that's why this is a rather slow burn recession. The other thing that's quite different, so it's slow to take effect, but it's also a recession where, for all the reasons that Andrew said, the end is in sight. And I don't think I've experienced one where you're in the middle of it and you can see the green shoots ahead. You can see light at the end of the tunnel. It's like we're in a boat. We're all in a boat. There's choppy waters ahead, but we can see in the horizon clear blue skies and calm waters. But we've just got to get there. But there are people who are at the center of the boat who are perfectly safe, and there are people to the sides of the boat. Now, people in the center of the boat are largely residential owner-occupiers. Because of all the things and the affordability checks, stress testing, and all the stuff that have been put in place since 2008, they're largely protected. And also investors and business people who aren't highly leveraged. People at the edge of the boat who are likely to fall out with these choppy waters are the over-leveraged, people with failed business models, who haven't moved with the times and saved on cost efficiencies and all the rest of it, and they're a huge number, and investors, because the investor marketplace has been quite different from the owner-occupier marketplace. That hasn't been protected so much. It has still been possible to take on quite a lot of debt on a buy-to-let basis, where although rents have increased, you're still not in profit. I mean, there are a lot of HMO people, because of their contracts and the way the bills have gone up and the all-you-can-eat buffet pricing on utilities with their tenants, are struggling at the moment. You know, so there are people at the edge of the boat, and there are people that are going to fall out. So I think this is quite a unique recession. The clear blue waters is in sight, and I've never seen that before. And and it's kind of hit slowly, and it's allowed the savvy folks to stay a little bit ahead and make sure they protect themselves by being well inside the boat, holding on tight, and at the same time looking for these opportunities. And as Andrew mentioned, one of the biggest opportunities is the fact that the residential owner-occupier market, and therefore residential owner-occupier housing, is largely protected from falls because of measures put in place after 2008. The commercial arena is not. So the gap between the two property types in terms of price per square foot is widening and will continue to widen. And at the same time, we have more permitted development rights than any time before to convert these spaces into residential use. So if you're occupying the center of the boat, we all know that recessions are the optimum time to kind of capitalize and create wealth. But what sort of wealth is it that you're creating? I don't think it is worth getting into property looking for immediate capital appreciation. Capital appreciation will happen 7, 8, 10 years, but you got to pay the bills in the meantime, you know, and paying the bills in the meantime has got to be from equity, from wealth that you create when you do the deal. And that is by buying below market value from motivated sellers, and also buying property with equity that you can build in by changing use from commercial to residential to take advantage of those differential prices. And when you've built those things, because the housing market is, although the housing market, I agree with Andrew, no more than 10% falls. That's what a lot of experts are saying. But it doesn't necessarily mean houses and residential properties will be easy to sell. If you're building 8 flats, or you're converting an office into 8 flats, I wouldn't be optimistic about selling all 8 flats to new owner-occupier first-time buyers in 2-3 months, or selling them off plan. It is going to be a long, hard slog. And the problem with developing properties where your exit is sale, you don't make your profit until the last 2 or 3 units, or the last 10-20% of units are sold. That's where your profit is. Mm-hmm. And if that's going to take you a year to sell everything, then that's going to severely affect the profitability on the whole deal. But rental is going gangbusters at the moment. Rental returns are growing at the fastest pace that they have been growing in the last decade. So the most obvious exit for any scheme is rent. You'll have them all let in a weekend, and you'll produce cash flow. You know, because that's the other way to make money in this recession. You're building equity in the deals that you do, and you're building positive cash flow to help you stay in the center of that boat. Mm-hmm. And you do that a few times, you can see the sunny waters ahead and all of that. And when we get there, that's where we'll see the capital appreciation, that extra bonus of capital appreciation, giving you wind in your sails, if you like, to really set yourself up. I mean, people who do the right things at recessions set themselves up. It is actually much harder to create massive wealth in a boom than it is at times like this. But at times like this, you need knowledge, you need a bit of know-how, you need a bit of guidance, you need confidence, really, that when the world is telling you that you're nuts, that you are actually on the correct path.
Absolutely loving the analogy, and like to explore it a bit further. So what gives you the confidence, Ranjan, that there are these tropical, warm, still waters ahead of us? You seem very clear about that. So yes, what makes you think that this is a short-term predictable?
All I was doing was putting in colloquial terms what Andrew just said. Mm-hmm. All the stats that he pointed to are true. And we know, how it's like energy prices have spiked, for example, mm-hmm. And they are actually coming down, but it's taking time to feed into the inflationary figures because of the statistical way those are calculated. Mm-hmm. So this is a lot of this is a little bit of sort of statisticians just having a little bit of fun with people's ordinary lives. You can see the data, and that's what Andrew alluded to. And all I was doing was putting it in colloquial language. The data, the real data today does not point to long recession like it did in 2008, 2009, because all the forward data was looking as gloomy as today. Now the forward data is not looking as gloomy. So therefore, it will take time to feed into the statistics, which aren't represented in the way the statistics are calculated today.
Okay,
so
that makes complete sense. So if we capture that in a snapshot, where both of you are in agreement, it seems that inflation appears to be rolling over. The worst of the, if we call it the energy crisis, I know that sounds a bit overexciting, but you know, if the energy issues are perhaps, we've seen the worst of it, and we'll see an unwinding of that. Whilst interest rates are remaining hard, so we were almost at peak by the sounds of it, maybe another 0.5% or 0.75%, and then there's going to be a period of time when they gently ease off. Now, Andrew put the number on it of settling down at 4. Are you with that? Is that where you are with this, Ranjan, or would you put a higher or lower figure on where the base rate is likely to settle in the next, let's say, 2 years?
You know what? I think it is largely academic and tossing a coin to try to predict the exact number. What I'm certain of is the trend. The trend is a little bit up in the short term, but then down a lot more in the medium term. So the peak that we're likely to see by summer, I don't think will be there, say, December this year, January next year. I think it will start to come off that. But the exact numbers and basis points is largely academic. It's the trends that I am backing rather than specifics.
Right.
If I chip in with a bit of technical data here to assist you with that, Paul, LIBOR, as we all know, it was renamed SONIA. It's the interbank trading rates. The LIBOR 5-year money was running at 3.6%. It's nudged up to 4%. Now, that gives you an indication the 5-year money that banks are borrowing and lending on is at 3.64%. And that's where things like a 5-year fix will fall. So that is why I'm predicting it'll be around there.
Fine. So,
and we are seeing that in actual mortgages as well. Mortgages, this month, mortgages dropped on 5-year fixes to about 3.9 through to the 4.1 range. So it's another indication.
I mean, that's what we've been advising our students. I mean, people are a bit scared, really, when they come off fixed rates and they're now on standard variables. But my advice to people is, look, if you can hang in there for 6 months to a year, there'll be better options to lock into fixed rates in 6 months to a year than there have been in the last 6 months. Again, that's a reflection of what Andrew's saying and these choppy waters we're now in.
I think that's a really important point just to hover over and make sure that's not missed, is that there was a lot of fear factor last year, wasn't there? Particularly around the sort of the short-lived Liz Truss era of, you know, everybody aggressively locking in as much money as they could. Because, for example, I think Andrew alluded to it, you know, there was some parts of the media suggesting enormous spikes in inflation, which obviously we haven't seen that come out. So and I appreciate this is not financial advice, and no doubt people will need to seek out their own advice if they need it. But your view now is, if you're coming out of a fixed rate on a commercial property, or it's less relevant to resi, I suspect, your view is perhaps not fixed now, but ride the wave, see where we are in, let's say, 12 months time, and then you might think there might be more affordable rates at that point in our cycle.
That's what I personally am doing.
Yeah. Fine.
I would agree. It's a case of, don't put your head in the sand. Don't say, I'm not going to review it till 12 months time.
Yes.
Keep your eye on what is happening and constantly monitor the market. I mean, we had Liz Don't Trust, Kamikaze Quasi, you'll probably edit that out, but they caused a run on the market.
Yeah.
That is what caused this, or added to this ripple. And who's to say, I don't know, Rishi does something silly, and Rishi's out.
Yeah.
We don't know. So, you've got to keep your finger on the pulse of the market. But our view is 6 to 12 months, you'll get better products based upon where 5-year money is going, where banks are going, and the stabilization effect of various measures that are going in.
Cool. That's very helpful. So then I think listeners and people watching the podcast might be doing little mental calculations themselves. I think we should probably help spell it out a little bit. So I'll come to you first, Ranjan. In terms of those sitting at the center of the boat, give us your mental checklist as to what the attributes are of the people sitting in the middle of the boat, because it's not too late for people obviously to get their house in order, is it? It's never too late to get your house in order, make some changes to your business, make some changes to your lifestyle. So give us a little bit of a mental checklist, Ranjan, first, and then we'll come to Andrew for his, of what does it look like, or what attributes do you have if you're comfortably sitting in the middle of this boat with the choppy waters that we're anticipating, whether it's for 12 months, 24 months, whatever it will be.
It's cash flow. It's ultimately cash flow. Cash flow keeps you in the center of the boat, positive cash flow. People who are in a lowly geared position across their portfolios are naturally occupying that center boat territory straight off the bat. The people who have higher gearing but more cash reserves to ride this. If people have a little bit of cash reserves, they will ride this. And people need to actually look at revenue optimization. If they're doing property, if they're doing rentals, if you're looking at what's generating the most rent right now, it's residential. So where you've got commercial properties, we have commercial buy-to-lets as well. We have commercial properties which are reaching the end of their lease. And in a recession, those are harder to lease out to other commercial occupiers. So then it's using the permitted development rights to convert the maximum of the space you can into residential usage and renting that out. Because the market for residential tenancies is so high. We have a situation now where the difference, say, between a shoddy one-bedroom flat in a town and an A1 condition flat in the same town to rent is actually quite high. There was a time when I started in property where most people renting did so as a stepping stone. A stepping stone while they save up a deposit to buy a house. So they would gravitate to lower end properties so that they can maximize the amount they save for their house. There's a whole generation that does not aspire to buying a house. So they aspire to living the best life they can and having the best experience in life today. So if a property is A1 condition, but the rental rate is a little bit higher than average, but they feel they're getting a good experience for that, because they're not looking to save up for that deposit for the house they're going to buy, they're willing to spend that on the experience of living in an A1 property that gives them that premium experience. So people can put themselves in a better cash flow position by looking at their stock and looking at how they can maximize the revenue from that, and therefore the positive cash flow from that. Because positive cash flow is going to be the one thing that will keep you in the center of the boat, or reserves if you can't up your revenue streams.
And perhaps we just need to be a bit more patient in terms of aspirations for capital growth in the short term, I suppose, is the message.
I would assume that it ain't happening, because all the stuff that I've just talked about is I can control, you can control. I haven't got Scooby-Doo about capital appreciation. I know it'll happen, but the problem with capital appreciation, particularly in higher value areas, it happens it's feast or famine. You'll get years of nothing. If you look at London, for example, you get years of Zippo, and then you get 3 or 4 years of double-digit growth, 17%, 18%, and they'll happen for 3 or 4 years in a row. So I can't tell you exactly when those will happen, but it will all catch up.
Yeah.
Because the rampant inflation we've had mean that as soon as we get to the clear blue skies, one thing that starts to happen is wages pick up. Because the price of everything has gone up. As the economy improves, wages have to pick up. And when wages start to pick up, then the price of assets such as property suddenly looks cheap. 100 grand does not feel the same as it was 5 years ago. With 10% inflation, how can it? So how is it possible that the price of 100 grand property can remain 100 grand in 5, 6, 7 years time? As people's wages increase, when we get to better economic time, affordability goes up, the feeling of 100 grand feels less. In the 1960s, being a millionaire was a big deal. There's so many millionaires out there now. Million is not much as it was in the 1960s. So for that reason, the price of assets have got to keep pace with that, but it doesn't happen evenly. Like the price of pasta going up in Tesco, it seems to be nice and even every week. But with property, that price correction, inflationary correction, doesn't happen evenly. So it'll all happen, but who can predict? I can't. I know it's going to happen in 10 years, but what you can predict, cash flow.
Got you. So focusing on cash flow, it's advantageous, obviously, to have low gearing, or at least not excessive gearing. And if you have the ability to reinvest in your offering to ensure that it's towards the top of the market rather than the middle ground or bottom. Andrew, what would you add to this mental checklist of those that are in the middle of the boat?
Well, there's a couple of things I'd add, but before I do, I'd also like to say we're in a different time to the 1960s when Ranjan was a young boy, because we've got we've got foreign
I
money.
learned about it in history, Andrew.
We've got foreign money coming in, and if we look at investment in London last year, 40% of real estate purchased was from the APAC region, the Asia Pacific. So money was coming in. The year before, 37% of the money came from the USA. So that does have an impact on affordability and prices, which is another reason prices have been rising, and they rise in spikes, because it depends on what domicile is pumping cash in to put additional pressures on the economy. But I do totally agree, cash is king in your business. And to sort of touch on a few areas more sort of detailed, tax leakage in your business.
Yeah,
that is one of your massive outflows on your business, but everybody looks at it as, oh, well, I've done the year's trading and now let's worry about the tax. No, actually plan your business and structure your business to minimize tax leakage, maximize profit first, and minimize tax leakage. Again, monitor all your other costs, your mortgage costs, costs of trades that are coming in, where you get your materials from, etc. Renegotiate deals, renegotiate your finance deals. If you're coming towards the end of a fixed term, often you'll find a lender will give you a better deal just for staying loyal to them before the deal expires, because they know you're going to parachute out if you don't do that deal. If you are buying real estate now, make sure it's cash flow positive on your forecasts and get as much evidence as you can to support the fact that that deal will be cash flow positive on a rental, and buy at forward prices. We are saying prices are falling, so don't buy at today's market price. Predict where the price is going to be 6, 12 months forward and buy at that price, rather than locking yourself into something that is going to cause you a headache. And if you're in a strategy where you offer an all-you-can-eat buffet, such as serviced accommodation or HMOs, start getting a bit smarter. There's a lot of HMO landlords who've individually put electric supplies to rooms. Start metering the usage or have a fair usage policy. And if it goes above that fair usage, everybody chips into the pot.
Mm-hmm.
And again, there are, Ranjan sort of alluded to better quality finished flat to a poor quality one. Spot areas where the demand is and supply that demand. That is where you will maximize your returns. So it's all about spotting where the gaps are in markets and filling the gaps where the lucrative bits are.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I would add to what Ranjan said. But your tax leakage is a big one.
That's
and
great.
If you follow what we're doing, next month you might find there's a big piece on tax that we'll be putting out.
Fantastic. I mean, that's never been more important because there's so much change going on, isn't there? And we've had a previous guest on the podcast who wrote a really fascinating book it's along the lines of taxation, daylight robbery. Dominic Frisby is the author, and he makes that the point that our tax code in the UK is so complex and so detailed that it is remarkable that anybody can comply with it. Right. Well, we'll keep an eye on the stuff that you're going to publish. I don't want to send us down this rabbit hole, but obviously since we've seen a lot of taxation changes, it's interesting to see the growing narrative of a section, not all, a section of entrepreneurs, threatening or actually relocating to sunnier climes, and that it doesn't thrill me to see that, because I think it's great if we have the pool of talent here in the UK. It's a great place to do business. There's great talent in the UK. Really, what we want to be doing is drawing people into the UK, to have all the innovation that we're so capable of. Okay, switch. So quick, I suppose, a fairly standard question that many of the guests have commented upon. Then we'll cast our eyes to the future, and then we'll bring things to a bit of a conclusion. So one of the questions I've asked all of the guests is the era of cheap money now officially over? So obviously, we've had years and years and years since the great financial crisis, of effectively zero interest rates. And that has had, we can't deny that's had an impact on the investing landscape. Is that era now officially over?
Yes.
And how do investors need to think differently then?
Well, yes. I mean, the cheap money, the subsidized money, basically had the effect of pile into any asset, and you're pretty much guaranteed to do well. It was quite hard to make a mistake. Now it's just back to fundamentals. You invest based on the equity you create in the deal through your own knowledge and the cash flow you can generate from that deal. It's fundamentals again. It's as simple as that. We've lived through this crazy period where money was artificially cheap, and pretty much you could buy it. It was very difficult to foul up, and that was shown by the level of repossessions that we've had in the last decade.
Yeah, I would agree. Again, the cheap money is gone. It was subsidized. Why was it cheap? It was cheap for a number of reasons. One, we were trying to hit an inflation target that we've never managed to pin the tail on the donkey yet. But it was cheap because the government have been printing their own money and paying interest on that at an alarming rate. But actually, if interest rates are low, quantitative easing that's taken place means it wasn't really costing anything. And with the taxation growth that was happening, it meant they were able to cover it, and the real cost of that was declining. Now there's been rampant inflation. That's eroded that debt pile further. The interest rates are on the way up. I'm predicting they'll be on the way down towards summer/end of year in that window. And that therefore reduces the cost on government. So I think it's over. It's never going to go back to where it was in probably my lifetime anyway. But it is going to be hovering around, as I say, the 4% range in the midterm 5-year window.
Okay, great stuff. Well, look, let's switch the focus now to the future, and let me see if I can drag out of you a prediction or two for 2023. Now, some people hate predictions. That's fine. We can rebrand them forecasts if we have to. But give us a couple.
Or we could just have a bit of fun and see what the best answer is.
We could, and I think when I host my breakfast meetings, the kind of things that are perennially discussed at the moment are things, obviously, much that we've touched upon in terms of rates and property markets. But, I think there's anxiety about EPCs, for example, and all the rest of it. But I don't want to kind of steal your thunder or point you in any particular direction. But yeah, Ranjan, give us a couple of thoughts about the year ahead. What do you think we might see?
I think Boris Johnson coming back as PM and Liz Truss as Chancellor.
Right, excellent. Okay.
Is what's going to happen in not England but Cloud Cuckoo Land, I think. Andrew, you lead. I'll come up with something.
I think it's definitely going to be Jeremy Corbyn making a comeback and having Kamikaze Kwasi as Chancellor. I mean, he'd do a better job than Diane Abbott. So
these are radical predictions that we're getting today.
Oh dear.
Coming back to a property sense, though. I do feel there's massive opportunity with the dynamics in the commercial market space changing, businesses going bust. I mean, there are BBC News headlines out there, greatest number of insolvencies. But actually, if we took the trend line of the last 5 years, and then we looked to where the COVID was, and there was the lowest number in approaching history, then it's gone back up. What happened is, if you mirror and match the two bits of data, it levels off as the same number of businesses folding over the last 5 years, month on month. So all that's happened is COVID has created an artificial buffer that sustained businesses that should have failed. Because there's a glut of them happening, because business models have changed. I mean, the amount of bank branches, we've only got to look at the reports put out by banks. There's something like 25,000 bank branches coming to market over the next year or two. Massive numbers. You've got to look at the way people have changed their ways of working. Working from home is the norm. My son works for a major household name, and he left the organization, went somewhere else, came back, and his new contract is you permanently work from home.
I think, Andrew, I mean, I don't want to be controversial here. One of the problems we're in is that working at home is how it started, but for too many people is simply at home.
Yeah. I'll make no comments.
Are you questioning productivity levels there, Ranjan?
Yes, you could say that.
Yeah. I mean, there is because of that, there is a glut of commercial real estate, and I predict that commercial real estate is going to be fire sailed off. We've already seen it happening with investment funds, pension funds, absolutely fire sailing stuff out the door. And we're talking assets which are probably out of the budget of your average investor, but acquired with the right knowledge in the right way. This can be converted and some really great returns achieved off them.
Okay, so just a couple of two or three quick fire questions on those though. So obviously your base case from both of you is that commercial, the sort of value of commercial property is likely to fall in a recessionary environment, changing landscape, business trends and what have you. Residential property is going up, so that's where the equity is to be made. Where do you factor into that the government's intervention in the relationship between the landlord and the tenant, for example? So we know we've got legislation kind of coming our way in the next few years, which could really potentially bring into question the standard contract that we all use, the AST. Have you factored that into kind of a risk assessment in terms of converting all this commercial to resi? How do you think about that?
I think there are other more risks that we sort of need to look at. rather than that. I'm not convinced that that will happen. And the reason that won't happen is because small landlords have no voice. Small landlords can shout and wail as much as they want, but they have no voice. There is big institutional money in residential buy-to-let right now coming in, and those guys have a voice. I mean, we see this all the time. If you look in property, for example, the amount of laws or rules that are brought in because big developers want them. Help to buy is not help to buy, it's help to sell. It's because the big developers fund political parties and they influence those policies, which create an environment for customers to easily buy their product. That is help to buy. Who's doing that? The big developers. Little old me, I don't have the ability to influence policy that way. So when you are doing buy-to-let, you can't have one law for one buy-to-let landlord like Lloyd's Bank Group, and another, and that law not being equally applicable to Joe Bloggs with one buy-to-let. So that's why I feel that there is safety there, because you have other bigger players with a better voice or a louder voice than us batting our corner. I think the big challenges are where we are not aligned, where the small investor is not aligned with the big people like the John Lewis's and the Lloyd's Bank and all of this sort of stuff, because they are buying properties where they're having multiple rental units in one building, and they're normally new build, so they meet with all the EPC criteria. They've got economies of scale from having multiple units in one building. Where we are not aligned with what they are doing, we will suffer. So if you've got flats in other people's blocks, you'll be milked for service charges. You won't be able to compete with those guys who've got multiple units in one building. Where you've got individual terraced houses in northern towns or whatever, with a whole roof and lots of external walls, you won't be able to bring them up to standard to meet the EPC rules, you know. But where you can compete with these characters is you're buying a small office building, you're using permitted development rights, you're converting it to 5 flats. By doing that conversion, you've got economies of scale of having multiple units under one roof, same as the big guys. And by doing the conversion, you are automatically building residential units which are conformant with all the latest regulations, EPC and all of that. Again, same level foot playing field as the big guys. You know, so my advice to people is make sure that your property interests are in line with the people's who have got a lot bigger voices, because they're not going to have one rule for you and one rule for them. It'll be one rule for all.
Very good. One final question on that, and then what I'm going to ask you just is to tell us a little bit about direction of travel, so what the plans are specifically for you, and then how we can obviously connect the audience to both of you. I suppose this final question is just following on that theme of, following the big boys, if you like, creating, in the illustration that you gave, commercial to resi 5 flats. One of the questions that comes up in the breakfast meeting quite frequently is this distinction between having, let's say, 5 flats on one freehold, separating out the utilities, so each tenant is responsible for their utilities, but keeping it all on one freehold and effectively refinancing it as a commercial unit on one title. Contrasting that with those that then choose to title split it. I think in the context of this question is the advice that you gave us earlier, which is this is the market really to buy and hold, and a sale exit is going to be reasonably challenging. So in the context of buy and hold, what I'm interested in both your views, like what part of which side of the line do you jump on? Do you fall on? Do you keep it as a freehold, or are you an advocate of title splitting to kind of create further value? What's your views?
My view is I keep it as a freehold. If you title split that, you need 2 separate legal entities, one to hold the title to the flat. Therefore, if you're the landlord, you'll need, say, sole trader and a limited company to hold the freehold. The problem with that is if you come to refinance, and this is one of the things that people miss out on this, not only have you got the costs of the title split, but you've also got the costs of operation. And then when you title split, I want a mortgage. Number one, I've got to choose multiple mortgage suppliers, so I can't have it all under one roof.
Mm-hmm.
That means multiple conveyances happening all at the same time. With each conveyance, both the leaseholder and the freeholder get sent inquiries from the lender. So you've got two sets of legal costs, and the freeholder basically has to respond to the inquiries made by the mortgage company on behalf of the leaseholder. So there's lots of hidden costs in here that people never factor in. They focus and zone in on a product rate, but they miss the big picture. And if you're doing it all in a corporate structure, all of the interest is tax relievable anyway. So just stop mucking about. Stop wasting your time and your energy and your effort.
Okay, that's Andrew's very clear view. Ranjan, do you take a different view, same view?
Similar. I think it's just worth doing a cost benefit for each deal that you do.
Mm-hmm.
I've done both in my time, and I can. These days it's mostly keeping it on one freehold.
Mm-hmm.
You will rarely magically create more money just by splitting title, because when on all the valuation reports I've seen, when I'm valuing a building with 4 flats, the valuation report will say flat 1 is valued at this, flat 2 is valued at that, flat 3 is valued at 4, at this. They don't say here's a magic amount because you're splitting title.
Mm-hmm.
The aggregate is the same. So I don't fully understand that, but there are cases where it is applicable. You have to do cost benefit. So what do I mean by those cases? Sometimes the individual flats would be at mortgage levels. It's normally related to the mortgage product. You can get particularly good mortgage products for them as individual flats.
Mm-hmm.
Or vice versa. You can get a particularly good mortgage product for as a whole. So for me, the swinging decision has not been I'm getting more value out of it. It's the mortgage products availability that give me a better deal.
Very good. Excellent. Okay. And obviously, like circling back to the initial disclaimer, it's all about the due diligence, isn't it? Making your own decisions based on your own facts, but that's very, very, very helpful. So as we bring things to a conclusion, what are we looking at this year? Give us just a sentence or two about the direction of travel for this year. So Andrew, what's the year ahead look like for you? What are you focusing on?
The year ahead for me, I look at it as very positive. There is so much opportunity out there that I'm getting involved in. My students are getting involved in, and I am seeing some really lucrative opportunities out there. So to me, it's all about land banking, commercial real estate, and adding value through asset maximization, big conversion to residential, improving tenancies, taking money out of deals that has not been taken out before, such as dilapidations and other areas where you can squeeze it.
Mm-hmm.
The opportunities are there, and this is the time to be land banking everything, not necessarily building it out this year, but land banking stuff so that you can then develop it out as prices rise and it becomes economic, and then you land at the end market with a higher end value product.
Mm-hmm. Very good. Ranjan, tell us a little bit about your direction of travel for 2023. What's the focus?
I think the key focus I'm advising people is to change their mindset. We are transitioning from years of it being a seller's market, and it's transitioning to a buyer's market. So it is about in a buyer's market, it's about being picky, it's about being choosy, it's about being patient. Mm-hmm. It's not about being in a rush to acquire something, being in a beauty parade, bidding more to secure sites. That mindset needs to transition, and too many people I find are coming to me with deals, and they're saying this is a great deal, and I'm saying compared to what? And they're usually comparing it with things that were offered to them 6 months ago, And the thing is to be patient, to be picky, to focus on deals that are not good compared to what you were offered 6 months ago, but what you feel you will be offered in 6 months' time. And those are the ways to basically keep it safe, keep it real in investing in 2023.
Fantastic. Excellent. So as we bring this to a conclusion, it would be remiss of me not to at least mention the Baker Street property meet. Andrew, I'll let you have the final word on Baker Street. Go on then. Give it. Tell us what Baker Street is. Ranjan led it at the top by saying it's the largest property meet in the UK. So I'm going to let you have the final word on the Baker Street. Tell us a bit about it.
Yeah. Well, I think the Baker Street is a unique event. We have delegates traveling from all over the globe to the Baker Street. It's where the best networking happens. We have some serious investors in the room with a lot of money. We have a lot of unique content. The content that Ranjan and I were one of the few property meets that put out our own view, and we nail it to the mast in front of the room. So we are speakers every single month, and we bring in guests who generally you won't see elsewhere. Strategic directors from Barclays, directors from auction houses. So the content is very unique, it's inspiring, and it's keeping you at the bleeding edge of where the property market is.
Fantastic. Ranjan, Andrew.
Ranjan?
No, it's networking at its best. 300 people every month. It's people who are doing, it's people who really want to keep their knowledge at the cutting edge. It's not about strategies that worked 5 years ago. Who cares about that? It's what's working right now.
Brilliant. So Andrew, Ranjan, huge personal thanks for coming on the podcast. It's been an absolute pleasure. Really grateful for you spending the time with us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. So please like, subscribe, comment on the Property and Investor podcast. And if you're not going to the Baker Street meet and you can manage to come to my humble gathering, the Property and Investor Breakfast, you're always welcome. Thank you very much for listening to the podcast, and look forward to speaking to you another time.